So good to have you join us today. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Jun in Seoul. We have a lot on our plate today, so let's get started with a look at the day's highlights. The Trans-Pacific Partnership deal has been sealed with the promise to strip trade barriers among 12 founding nations, and Korea is eyeing membership as well. Despite Korea's record low interest rates, a growing number of people are turning to low-risk, long-term, but low-return savings. After years of intense negotiations, 12 founding member countries have finally agreed on the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal on Monday. Dubbed the largest free trade pact in this generation, what does the TPP deal mean to the global economy and Korea? Our Kim Min-ji starts us off.
They're calling it a historic agreement. After 5 years of talks, trade negotiators from 12 countries have struck a deal that will reduce tariffs on almost 18,000 categories, ranging from automobiles to food, and set standards for labor and the environment in the trade bloc.
We have come to an agreement that will support jobs, drive sustainable growth, foster inclusive development, and promote innovation across the Asia-Pacific region.
The trade pact, called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, involves the U.S., Japan, Malaysia, Vietnam, and 8 other Pacific Rim countries, which together account for about 40% of the global economy. It is the largest trade pact ever, making up for more than a quarter of the world's trade volume, and covers a combined population of almost 800 million. Supporters of the deal say the agreement will facilitate higher-paying jobs, as well as boost productivity and competitiveness, and raise living standards in member countries. Some also see it as a way to counter a rising China, which is not a member of the agreement, and paves a way to open new markets for American companies. However, critics have not been happy about the negotiations, which they say have been overly secretive in nature, and argue that the trade deal will benefit large corporations and shift more jobs overseas. Although the deal is being concluded, this is just the first step in what is likely to be a long road ahead, as the participating countries take the deal back to their own governments for approval. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
And to tell us more about this, Professor Yang Joon from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. So good to see you, Professor.
Happy to be here.
All right, so this mega trade deal, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, has been reached after intense negotiations between 12 member countries. What kind of impact will this have on the global economy?
Okay, well, in these FTAs, usually for the participants, there's some increase in GDP. And for the non-participants, there's a slight fall in their GDP. And at least according to computer simulations, it seems to be similar here. The member countries who signed the TPP will gain anywhere between 0.5 to about 2.5% of GDP, depending on the country, while countries like Korea, well, our negative effect isn't that big because we've signed FTAs with many of these countries already,
right.
But we seem to be losing we'll probably lose about 0.12% of GDP over the next 10 years.
All right, then now the negotiations are over. What kind of items are on the agenda for this deal to take effect?
Okay, since the ministers were involved, they only deal with principles. So now lawyers have to write the wording. And that's expected to take about a month. And then it'll have to be gone over by all the negotiators to make sure that the wording reflects what they actually said. And then it'll have to pass the national assemblies of each country, which will be the most difficult part. A lot of countries have some problems with some of the provisions. The United States has expressed its displeasure on the length of drug protection. They wanted it to be 12 years, but right now it seems to be somewhere between 5 and 8 years. They've also expressed displeasure with having to open up their sugar market.
Sugar market.
Yes,
okay.
And the tobacco industry not being able to use the investor settlement disputes. So there's a whole bunch of details like that on the U.S. part. In Japan's part, they're also going to face a lot of difficulties because apparently they've opened up a lot of the agricultural market. So there will be additional liberalization measures in rice, which is always sensitive there, as well as dairy products. And then for Canada, they have an election coming up in just a few weeks. So that's going to be another hurdle there. And other countries have smaller but real problems in their National Assembly with some of the provisions on this agreement.
All right. Well, Korea is not one of the 12 founding members, but after seeing these negotiations end, they're over and the deal is struck, Korea has expressed interest in joining the deal in the second phase after looking at the details. But now I'm wondering, why didn't Korea join from the very beginning?
Bad timing.
Okay.
This TPP used to be a very small negotiation between very small countries until the United States decided to participate in 2008. Now, if you go back in history, that's around the time we finished Korea-US FTA.
Okay.
And the United States actually asked Korea to join the negotiations there, but we were having a lot of problems domestically with the Korea-US FTA. Remember all those candlelight demonstrations and so on. So Korea decided that since we signed FTAs with many of these countries anyway, we're going to delay participating. And then I think this actually was a crucial mistake on our part. When Japan joined the negotiations in 2013, Korea wanted to look at it again. And I think at that stage we should have joined.
In 2013.
Because, well, with Japan and the United States going in, it'll be, at least if you look at the size of the economy, it'll be de facto NAFTA, Japan FTA.
Yes.
But because of the political problems that we were having at the time, because the Park Geun-hye administration was just getting started and we've changed the responsibility for negotiations from the foreign ministry to the industry ministry, there were all these problems. So we wanted to put more emphasis on China-Korea FTA. And TPP sort of got lost in the muddle there. And by the time we decided we wanted to join, negotiations were too far away. So the participating countries didn't want another new player to sort of mess up the negotiations they had already. So we missed the opportunity.
All right. Well, but if Korea does join the TPP in the second phase, what kind of impact will this have on the Korean economy? Because like you said before, we already have FTAs in place with 10 out of the 12 founding member nations.
Right, which accounts for the fact that our losses from TPP, if we're excluded, is so small. But still, there will be some positive effects if we join. Computer simulations say that we gain about 1.7% of GDP over the next 10 years. Given the low growth that we have right now, that's not a negligible amount. Also, we have more opportunities to use other countries to gain intermediate parts and increase the competitiveness of Korean products. So there's some good opportunities there. There's reasons to join the TPP. But we'll have to see exactly what kind of conditions, what kind of provisions are in the agreement, because the TPP negotiating countries have been very secretive about what kind of provisions they have, and it's only now coming to light. So we'll have to look at the actual provisions to see whether it's worth joining for Korea.
All right, but then many experts have actually said that it would be difficult for Korea to join the TPP in the second phase. Do you think that'll be the case? And if that is, then what should Korea do in order to increase its chances?
Well, it'll be more difficult because all the provisions, the wording of the agreement is already set. So instead of Korea being able to affect those wording, now we're going to have to fit ourselves into the wording.
Right, accept them.
Right.
Okay.
And then if you look at the experience of the WTO, the later countries which come in later always have to go through more loops. So it'll be more difficult for us from that point of view. And then, at least from the news reports which are coming out now, there will be some liberalization in the rice and dairy sector, which is very sensitive in Korea. So there will be some political problems along that part as well. I think, though, what's worth mentioning is the Japan, by signing TPP, has really liberalized its market a lot and gained a lot of export competitiveness. Remember, Japan had FTAs with very few major countries, but now, because of the TPP, they've effectively signed an FTA with NAFTA. So they've gained a lot of competitiveness in those markets. Korea had Korea-US FTA, but now Japan is using the TPP to get almost the same conditions. So we're going to face a lot more competition in the US, in the NAFTA, in the Japanese markets. I think the way to go about hopefully counterbalancing that is to go ahead with the RCEP agreement, which Korea is participating in now with Asian countries, and also try to pass the Korea-China FTA as quickly as possible.
All right. And that would increase the chances of Korea to join the TPP.
Well, the TPP can be considered somewhat separate, but we're going to lose a lot of the market because of the TPP anyway, because now Japan is on sort of an equal playing ground with Korea and the US. So we need to develop alternate markets. And one of the reasons that we didn't go into TPP to begin with, at least not enthusiastically, was that we wanted to place more emphasis on Korea-China FTA because, at least according to computer simulations, that would have more positive effect for Korea.
Okay. All right. We'll have to keep an eye on how this is all going to pan out for Korea and also the TPP itself. All right. Thank you so much for coming in today, Professor.
Thank you.
Korea hit a proud milestone 4 years ago when it exceeded $1 trillion in trade, becoming only the 9th country to do so in 2011. It also achieved this distinction every year since then. But this year, it looks like such could be slipping out of reach, in spite of the government's aggressive efforts to boost a country's ailing exports. Our Eunice Kim explains.
Back in July, when Korea's trade was on the decline 6 months in a row, the government rolled up its sleeves, pulling up investment to support affected sectors in a plan estimated to be worth some 116 trillion won, or $99 billion.
In the short term, we have our $1 trillion trade goal. In the medium and long term, we need to boost our fundamental export competitiveness.
3 months later, that downtrend is on its 9th consecutive month. August saw the deepest export plummet in 6 years, leading to an 11% fall in Korea's cumulative trade compared to the third quarter of last year. That is the lowest since 2011, when Asia's fourth largest economy celebrated its entry into the so-called $1 trillion trade club, despite challenges in the global economy then.
External conditions this year have really worsened to a point that the government's policies will likely fall short. Reaching the $1 trillion trade club looks to be out of reach this year.
$272 billion. That's how much additional trade Korea would have to bring in the fourth quarter. An onerous burden, even with Europe and the US's year-end shopping season in consideration. But Korea isn't alone. Given that trade globally has deflated by at least 10%, achieving the $1 trillion trade goal will likely prove challenging for other nations that were members last year as well. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
Korea is third in the world for its exports in the information and communications technology sector, moving up 1 spot from last year. According to the Institute for Information and Communications Technology Promotion, the nation's ICT exports reached $71 billion in the January to May period, behind China and the US, but ahead of Germany and Japan. Korea has seen its exports slide continually this year, but outbound shipments for the ICT sector have increased 0.01% on year in the run-up to September. Market tracker Gartner expects the global ICT market to shrink 5.5% this year from the year before. And industry watchers say recent data indicate that Korea may be one of the few countries to gain ground in the sector worldwide. Now, despite interest rates still sitting at record low levels, many Koreans are keeping their money stashed away in low-risk savings rather than going for higher returns. So how prevalent is this trend? Our Jung tells us more.
Koreans are choosing to put their money into low-return but low-risk savings accounts over other investment products, despite the country's record low interest rate that has been cut 4 times since last year. According to the Bank of Korea, currency and deposits took up 56.4% of total household assets in the first half of this year, logging a net inflow of $50 billion. This is much higher than the 46.3% recorded for the whole of last year. A breakdown of these numbers show a larger number of people chose to invest in long-term savings in the first 6 months of this year, with the value reaching $13 billion. That's more than double the amount invested in short-term savings. This comes as more money is being deposited in non-banking financial institutions that offer slightly higher interest than major banks. Experts say the increased global economic instability stemming from China's volatile stock market and uncertainties that remain over the U.S. Federal Reserve's potential rate hike have contributed to this cautious trend of saving.
As individuals choose to avoid risks, stock trade has been declining and people are trying to increase their total cash holdings.
The value of daily stock trade in September logged the lowest in 6 months, trading at an average $7 billion per day. Jung, Business Daily.
And that does it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, thanks so much for watching and see you soon.